Hello friends, welcome to Sleepy Science Drift. Tonight, we'll be drifting quietly through one of the most extraordinary stories ever told. The story of life on Earth. Not the loud, dramatic version, but the gentle, whispering kind. The kind you can close your eyes to and let wash over you like warm light through a window on a quiet afternoon. Life on Earth is not just remarkable, it is breathtaking in the most patient, unhurried way. It has been building, adapting, dreaming, and enduring for nearly 4 billion years. And in all that time, it has never once given up. Not through ice ages, not through volcanic winters, not through the darkness of mass extinctions. Life has simply found another way. Tonight, we'll explore some of the most fascinating, soothing, and quietly astonishing facts about this living world we call home. From the smallest microbe dissolving into the cracks of deep stone to the tallest tree breathing in sunlight at the top of the canopy. From the oldest creature patiently waiting beneath the sea to the tiniest insect carrying the weight of an entire ecosystem on its wings. And if you'd like to leave a comment below, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is as you press play, one sleepy soul at a time. But for now, there is nothing you need to do but rest, breathe gently, listen carefully, and allow your thoughts to soften as the wonders of our living world unfold. Let's begin. Life on Earth is nearly 4 billion years old. When you try to imagine 4 billion years, the mind goes quiet. It is a number too enormous to hold all at once, like trying to cup an ocean in your hands. Yet that is how long life has existed on this planet. The earliest traces of biology, tiny chemical signatures in ancient rock, suggest that living things were already present on Earth not long after the planet itself had cooled from its violent birth. In the beginning, there were no trees, no oceans full of fish, no forests ringing with birdsong. There were only the simplest of organisms, invisible to the naked eye, drifting in shallow seas, under a sky that looked nothing like ours. The atmosphere was thick with methane and carbon dioxide. The sun burned a little dimmer, the days were shorter. And yet, life was there, quietly multiplying, slowly experimenting with new forms and new ways of surviving. Every creature you have ever seen, every plant, every animal, every mushroom pushing up through wet soil after rain is the unbroken descendant of that ancient beginning. Not a copy, but a continuation, a thread stretched across 4 billion years without ever being cut. To know this is to feel something settle inside you. You are not separate from the history of this planet. You are its most recent chapter. The first oxygen on Earth was made by tiny living things. Long before oxygen filled our atmosphere, before the first breath of any animal was ever taken, the sky was a strange and hostile place. No oxygen, no protective ozone layer, no soft blue color at midday. Then something extraordinary happened. A group of ancient bacteria called cyanobacteria began doing something no living thing had done before. They learned to pull energy from sunlight, splitting water molecules and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. This process, which we now call photosynthesis, was not celebrated. At first, oxygen was a poison to most of the life that existed, and this slow leaking of the gas into the atmosphere caused one of Earth's earliest mass extinctions, quietly erasing the organisms that could not adapt. But over hundreds of millions of years, the oxygen built up, layer by layer, breath by breath. It accumulated in the oceans, then seeped into the air, building the atmosphere we now depend on entirely. Every breath you take tonight carries the legacy of those ancient bacteria. The air filling your lungs right now is a gift from some of the smallest, oldest, most patient living things this planet ever produced. They changed the world without knowing it, one tiny molecule at a time. Plants invented soil. Before plants colonized the land about 450 million years ago, the surface of the continents was mostly bare rock and dust. There was no rich brown earth, no crumbling loam between your fingers, no smell of rain on dry ground. The land was a silent, barren plain stretching to the horizon. Then plants arrived. They were small at first, barely more than mosses clinging to wet stone near the shorelines of ancient lakes. But they began something slow and transformative. Their roots cracked rock. When they died, their bodies decayed, mixing with broken mineral dust. Fungi helped break down the remains, weaving through the soil with their thread-like filaments. Bacteria colonized the new organic matter. Over millions of years, this collaboration between plants, fungi, and microbes created something that had never existed before on Earth: soil. Real, living soil, filled with nutrients and organisms and possibility. Without that soil, there would be no forests, no grasslands, no food growing quietly in fields, no trees, no us. When you press your hand into the earth, you are touching something that life itself built, layer by patient layer, over hundreds of millions of years. Trees can live for thousands of years. There is a tree in the mountains of eastern California called Methuselah. It is a bristle-cone pine, and it is more than 5,000 years old. When it was a young seedling stretching its first needles toward the sky, the pyramids of Egypt had not yet been built. The Roman Empire would not exist for another 2,000 years. The first written alphabets were only beginning to be carved into clay. Methuselah has grown through all of it, slowly, patiently, in rocky mountain soil at high altitude, where almost nothing else survives. These trees grow so slowly in harsh conditions that their wood becomes almost impossibly dense, resistant to rot, resistant to insects, resistant to time itself. But Methuselah is not even the oldest living individual. Clonal organisms, trees, and plants that reproduce by sending up genetically identical shoots from shared root systems can live far longer. Pando, the trembling aspen forest in Utah, is considered a single organism connected underground, thought to be tens of thousands of years old. These ancient lives do not rush. They do not hurry. They simply continue, year after year, ring after quiet ring, testimony to what patience can achieve. Some mushrooms are more connected to the forest than the trees themselves. When you walk through a forest and spot a mushroom rising from the damp ground, you are seeing only the smallest visible tip of something vast and ancient. The mushroom is merely the fruiting body, the equivalent of a flower or a fruit. The true organism lives below, spreading through the soil in a web of threads called mycelium, thin as spider silk, but extraordinarily tough and intelligent in function. These mycelial networks can spread for miles beneath the forest floor, connecting tree roots to one another in a web of mutual exchange. Through these threads, trees share sugars, water, phosphorus, and chemical signals. A tree under attack by insects can send warning chemicals through the network, and neighboring trees begin producing defensive compounds before the insects even arrive. Older trees, sometimes called mother trees, send nutrients down through the mycelial web to nourish younger seedlings growing in shadow. Seedlings that could never survive on their own without that underground support. Scientists have called this system the Wood Wide Web, and it operates in silence beneath every forest on Earth. A living internet built not from cables, but from the delicate threads of fungi, exchanging resources and information in a language older than any human word. Some flowers bloom only once in decades. In the cloud forests of Sumatra and in botanical gardens around the world, crowds sometimes gather in the middle of the night to witness something that may not happen again for years. The blooming of a Titan arum, commonly called the corpse flower. This remarkable plant spends years, sometimes a decade or more, building energy underground in a massive corm that can weigh over 100 kilograms. Then, when the time is right, it sends up a single enormous flowering structure that can reach over 3 meters tall, towering above the surrounding plants like a purple-streaked pillar. The flower opens for only 1 or 2 nights. During those brief hours, it heats its own interior to human body temperature and releases a powerful odor resembling rotting flesh. This smell, strange and overwhelming to us, is irresistible to the beetles and flies that pollinate it. Then it is over. The flower collapses, the plant retreats underground again to rest, to gather strength, to wait. There is something deeply peaceful about this kind of patience, spending years in quiet preparation for a single, brief moment of blooming. It is a reminder that not all of nature's beauty needs to be constant to be meaningful. The oldest seeds can still be coaxed back to life. Seeds are one of nature's most quietly miraculous inventions. They carry everything needed to build an entire living plant in a package sometimes smaller than a grain of sand. And some of them can wait, holding that potential in suspended stillness for a very long time. Scientists have successfully germinated a date palm seed found in the ruins of an ancient fortress near the Dead Sea. The seed was carbon dated to roughly 2,000 years old from around the time of ancient Rome. When carefully warmed and watered, it sprouted, a tree that had been waiting in silence since the Roman Empire. Even more astonishing, researchers in Siberia revived a flowering plant called Silene stenophylla from seeds buried in permafrost by squirrels more than 30,000 years ago. The woolly mammoth was still alive when those seeds were tucked into the frozen ground, and yet, given warmth and light, they bloomed. Inside a seed, time does not move in quite the way we experience it. Life simply pauses, patient and intact, carrying tomorrow inside itself across centuries. Ocean plankton produce half of every breath you take. Look out a window right now, or simply breathe in slowly through your nose and know that roughly half of the oxygen in that breath was made not by a forest, not by a meadow, but by the ocean. Specifically, by microscopic organisms floating near the surface of the sea. Phytoplankton are tiny, single-celled creatures, many of them invisible to the naked eye, that drift in the sunlit upper layers of the world's oceans. Like plants on land, they photosynthesize, absorbing carbon dioxide and releasing oxygen. And because they exist in such staggering numbers, stretching across every ocean on every continent, their collective contribution to the air we breathe is enormous. When you see a photograph of the ocean glittering in sunlight, you are looking at one of the most productive ecosystems on Earth. teeming with invisible life, breathing in and out with the rhythm of the seasons, feeding the atmosphere. Every breath connects you to the sea, even if you have never stood at its edge. Or the deep ocean floor is one of the least explored places on Earth. We have mapped more of the surface of Mars than we have of our own ocean floor. The deep sea, that vast, dark plain stretching across most of Earth's surface beneath kilometers of water, remains almost entirely unexplored. What we have found in the rare places where scientists have sent cameras and submarines suggests a world stranger and richer than anything on land. Creatures with no eyes but extraordinary sensitivity to vibration and pressure. Forests of glass sponges rising from the seafloor like cathedrals of frozen water. Vast communities of animals clustered around hydrothermal vents, surviving on the chemistry of the Earth itself. There are mountain ranges longer than the Himalayas running along the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. There are trenches deep enough to submerge Mount Everest with several kilometers to spare. And through almost all of it, life persists in forms we barely understand, living by rules that seem to contradict everything we know about biology. The deep sea is not empty. It is alive, and most of it is still waiting in patient darkness to be discovered. Whales are some of the most intelligent beings on Earth. In the deep ocean, far from land, humpback whales drift and sing. Their songs are long, haunting, complex compositions that can last for hours and travel for hundreds of kilometers through the water. But what makes these songs astonishing is not only their beauty, it is that they change. Over the course of months and years, populations of whales update their songs, adding new phrases, dropping old ones. A new melody can spread from one group to another across an entire ocean basin, passing from whale to whale like a cultural trend, a song that moves through the sea itself. Sperm whales communicate using complex sequences of clicks called codas. Different populations have different codas, different dialects that are learned and passed down through generations. Scientists who study them believe they live in tight family groups with deep social bonds, where elderly females carry knowledge of feeding grounds, migration routes, and social relationships that younger whales cannot yet know. These animals grieve. They have been observed carrying dead calves at the surface for days, reluctant to let go. They play. They cooperate. They remember. To know that such minds share this ocean with us is one of the most quietly profound facts about life on this planet. Elephants remember paths and places across hundreds of kilometers. In the dry savannas of Africa, a herd of elephants moves with calm purpose across a landscape that stretches to every horizon. They are guided by their matriarch, an old female who has lived long enough to remember where water lies, hidden beneath the sand in a dry season that comes only once a generation. Elephants have exceptional memories encoded in large brains with structures similar to our own. They remember individual faces, not just of other elephants, but of humans who showed them kindness or cruelty decades before. They remember the routes their ancestors walked, navigating toward water sources, using mental maps accumulated over a lifetime. When they encounter the bones of a family member on the savannah, herds have been observed stopping, touching the bones gently with their trunks, standing quietly in what appears to be something like mourning. They communicate with deep rumbles that travel through the ground, felt in the bones of the feet, before they can be heard, conversations that carry for kilometers across the landscape. An elephant, carrying decades of knowledge, guiding her family through drought and distance, is one of the most moving examples of what intelligence and memory look like in the animal world. Birds can navigate by starlight. On an autumn night, a small songbird called an indigo bunting sits in a tree, preparing to begin a migration that will carry it from North America to Central America, across thousands of kilometers of unfamiliar sky. It does not have a map, it does not have a compass. What it has is the ability to read the stars. Young indigo buntings learn the pattern of the night sky in their first summer, identifying the fixed point around which all the other stars appear to rotate, the celestial North Pole. They memorize this anchor, and when migration comes, they orient themselves by it, flying south through darkness, guided by the slow wheeling of the stars overhead. Other birds navigate using Earth's magnetic field, sensing it through proteins in their eyes or particles in their beaks, seeing the world with a compass built into their biology. Arctic terns fly from the top of the world to the bottom and back again, a journey of more than 70,000 kilometers each year, guided by senses we are only beginning to understand. The night sky is not empty to these birds. It is a map, a compass, and a calendar all at once, a system of navigation older than any technology we have ever built. Coral reefs are built grain by grain over thousands of years. If you could slow time down enough to watch a coral reef being built, what you would see would look like the most patient construction project in history. Tiny animals called coral polyps, each no larger than a pencil eraser, extract calcium from seawater and use it to build hard external skeletons. Each individual polyp creates only a tiny contribution. But generation after generation, century after century, the accumulated skeletons pile up into structures of astonishing complexity and beauty, entire mountains of calcified life rising from the seafloor. The Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Australia stretches for more than 2,000 kilometers and has been building for around 20,000 years. It is visible from space. It shelters around a quarter of all marine species. Its ridges and towers and tunnels were built by animals that died before they could see the reef take shape. When you think of something beautiful being built gradually, invisibly, by countless small acts of living, you are thinking about coral reefs. And everything they represent is a lesson in what persistence creates when it never gives up. Some animals practice something that looks like play. In the frozen waters of the North Atlantic, a young orca leaps from the water again and again, not hunting, not fleeing, not doing anything that a biologist would label as strictly necessary. It is simply leaping, spinning in the air, crashing back into the sea with a great white explosion of foam. Play is one of the most quietly extraordinary things in the animal kingdom. It appears across mammals, birds, and even some reptiles and fish. Animals chase, wrestle, toss objects, slide down slopes, and invent games with no apparent purpose beyond the joy of the activity itself. Young ravens in snowy regions have been observed sledding down rooftops and snowbanks on their backs or their feet, then walking back to the top to do it again. Dolphins surf in the bow waves of ships for no benefit other than the sensation of speed and motion. Polar bear cubs tumble and wrestle in the snow as their mothers watch. Play may be how young animals practice skills they will need later, but it may also be something more than that, an expression of something that feels, from the outside, remarkably like happiness. A living creature pausing in its survival and choosing, for a moment, to simply enjoy being alive. Fungi can be found on every continent, including Antarctica. If you lifted a handful of soil from almost anywhere on Earth, from a tropical rainforest to a dry Arctic tundra, from a suburban garden to the edge of a glacier, you would find fungi. Not the visible mushroom kind, but the invisible mycelial kind, threading through the soil in a web of life so dense and interconnected that scientists estimate a single teaspoon of healthy soil can contain hundreds of meters of fungal threads. Even in Antarctica, on the slopes of bare, wind-scoured rocks, where temperatures plunge and almost nothing seems to live, fungi persist, clinging to the undersides of translucent stones, surviving on the faintest traces of light and moisture that filter through. Fungi are not plants and not animals. They occupy their own kingdom, absorbing nutrients from the world around them, breaking down the dead, and returning their matter to the living. Without fungi, fallen trees would never rot. Nutrients would stay locked in dead wood for centuries. Forests would collapse under the weight of their own undecomposed remains. Every forest you have ever walked through was kept alive in part by fungi working invisibly beneath your feet, dismantling the old and feeding the new. A single teaspoon of healthy soil contains more living things than there are people on Earth. When you pick up a handful of rich garden soil and hold it, you are holding one of the most crowded places on the planet. A single teaspoon of healthy soil contains billions of bacteria, hundreds of meters of fungal threads, thousands of protozoa, and countless other microscopic organisms, all living, feeding, communicating, and dying in a universe contained within your palm. These organisms do more for the living world than we often give them credit for. Bacteria break down organic matter and release nutrients. Fungi carry minerals to plant roots. Tiny mites and worms aerate the soil, creating space for roots and water. Protozoa feed on bacteria, releasing nitrogen in forms that plants can absorb. Soil is not dirt. It is a living community, one that has taken thousands of years to develop, and that underpins almost every ecosystem on land. To press your hand gently into the earth is to touch a world within a world, a civilization of the very small, quietly doing the work that makes all other life possible. Some animals can survive being frozen and then thaw back to life. The wood frog of North America does something every winter that, by the logic of most biology, should be fatal. It freezes. As temperatures drop in autumn, ice crystals begin forming in the frog's body, starting between its cells and spreading outward. Its heartbeat slows, then stops. Its breathing ceases. More than 60% of the water in its body becomes ice. To any outside observer, it would appear dead, but inside, chemical processes are quietly protecting the most vital structures. The liver floods the cells with glucose, a natural antifreeze that prevents the cells themselves from freezing solid. And the frog waits, locked in ice through the cold months. When spring arrives and the temperature rises, the ice melts, the heart restarts, blood flows again, the frog blinks, stretches, and hops away. This ability is not magic, it is biology refined over millions of years of surviving precisely this challenge. But knowing that does not make it any less wonderful. Migratory birds travel on invisible highways in the sky. Twice a year, vast numbers of birds take to the air and move across the face of the planet in one of the most remarkable coordinated phenomena in the natural world. 1 billion birds stream south across continents in autumn and north again in spring, following routes so consistent that scientists call them flyways, invisible highways in the sky used by generation after generation for thousands of years. Some of these journeys are almost incomprehensible in their scale. The bar-tailed godwit, a shorebird, flies non-stop from Alaska to New Zealand, a journey of more than 11,000 kilometers over 9 days without landing, without eating, without sleeping in any conventional sense. Before departure, it doubles its body weight in fat, which it burns continuously during the crossing, shrinking its digestive organs to reduce weight and convert every available resource to fuel. The bar-tailed godwit does not stop because there is nowhere to stop. The Pacific Ocean offers no rest, and yet it arrives. There is something in that image worth holding on to as you drift towards sleep tonight. A small brown bird crossing the largest ocean on Earth, guided by starlight and magnetic fields, sustained by nothing but fat stored in its own body, continuing because continuing is what it does. The Amazon rainforest produces its own rain. In the vast green heart of South America, the Amazon rainforest does something extraordinary. It makes its own weather. Trees in the Amazon absorb water from the soil through their roots and release it as water vapor through their leaves, a process called transpiration. A single large tree can release hundreds of liters of water into the air in a single day. Across the Amazon basin, which contains hundreds of billions of trees, this creates a river of water vapor flowing through the atmosphere, sometimes called a flying river, that actually produces a significant portion of the region's rainfall. The forest rains on itself. It creates the clouds that water it. It maintains the humidity that keeps it alive. This is one of the most vivid examples of how life shapes its own environment rather than simply existing within it. The Amazon is not just a collection of trees growing in a wet place. The trees themselves are the reason the place is wet. Every leaf is a small act of creation, sending moisture upward into the sky, contributing to clouds that will fall as rain and water the same roots that released it. Some creatures communicate in ways we are still learning to decode. In the rainforests of the Congo, a bonobo named Kanzi learned to communicate using a board of symbols, pressing pictures to form requests, comments, and questions. What was remarkable was not just that he could do this, but how he did it, combining symbols in novel ways to describe things he had no direct symbol for, inventing his own solutions when the available language fell short. Honeybees perform a waggle dance inside the hive, a looping, vibrating movement that communicates the exact direction and distance of a food source relative to the position of the sun. Other bees read this dance and fly, often directly, to flowers they have never visited, guided by choreography. Elephants press their foreheads together and listen with their feet to rumbles traveling through the ground, receiving messages from family members kilometers away. Prairie dogs have been found to use distinct calls, not just to indicate the presence of a predator, but to describe it, communicating the size, shape, speed, and color of a specific threat. The living world is not silent. It is filled with communication in frequencies and forms we are only beginning to understand. The human body is itself a living ecosystem. You are not a single organism. You are a community. Across your skin, in your gut, in your mouth and lungs live trillions of microorganisms, bacteria, fungi, viruses, archaea, all coexisting with you in a relationship so intimate and so old that your body cannot function properly without them. Your gut microbiome, the community of microorganisms living in your digestive system, influences how you absorb nutrients, how your immune system develops, how you respond to stress. Babies born without exposure to diverse microbiomes in sterile environments face elevated risks of a range of health problems. The microbes are not passengers, they are partners. Some of the bacteria in your gut are doing things your own cells cannot do, producing vitamins, breaking down compounds your enzymes cannot process, communicating with your nervous system through chemical signals. Your brain and your gut microbiome are in constant, quiet conversation. You have never been alone, not for a single moment of your life. You have carried an entire world within you, and it has carried you. Trees in the same forest share resources with one another. An old Douglas fir, tall enough that its crown disappears into morning fog, is doing more than simply growing. Beneath the ground, through a network of fungal threads woven between its roots and the roots of its neighbors, it is sharing. When a young seedling sprouts in its shadow, too shaded to photosynthesize enough to survive on its own, the old tree can send sugars down through the mycelial network to the seedling's roots. This does not appear to be accidental. Studies have shown that trees preferentially share with related trees, with their own offspring, routing more nutrients to kin than to strangers. When a tree is dying, it sometimes releases a surge of nutrients and carbon into the network, a final gift to the community it is leaving behind. This is not charity in any human sense. It is biology, built over millions of years of co-evolution between trees and fungi. But the result looks, from the outside, remarkably like care. Like a community in which the strong quietly support the young and the dying give what remains to the living. Oceans regulate the temperature of the entire planet. Without the ocean, Earth would be a very different and much harsher place. The ocean absorbs enormous quantities of heat from the sun, storing it in its vast depths and releasing it slowly, smoothing out the temperature swings that would otherwise make the planet almost uninhabitable. Ocean currents carry warm water from the tropics toward the poles and cold water from the poles toward the tropics, distributing heat and keeping climates stable across continents. The Gulf Stream, a great river of warm water flowing northeastward across the Atlantic, keeps northwestern Europe far warmer than it would otherwise be at the same latitude. The ocean also absorbs roughly a quarter of all the carbon dioxide released by human activity, slowing the pace of climate change significantly. It absorbs heat, it generates oxygen, it carries nutrients across the globe. The ocean is not just a body of water. It is the climate system of the entire planet, a giant, living thermostat that has kept the conditions for life stable for billions of years. Some flowers and insects evolved together over millions of years. In the forests of Madagascar, there is an orchid called the Darwin's orchid, named for the scientist who first encountered it and immediately made a prediction so bold It seemed almost ridiculous at the time. The orchid has a nectar tube nearly 30 centimeters long, coiling down into the heart of the flower. Darwin, looking at it, declared that somewhere in Madagascar there must be an insect with a tongue 30 centimeters long that pollinated it. His colleagues laughed. 40 years after his death, they found it. A hawk moth, now called Morgan's sphinx moth, with a proboscis precisely long enough to reach the nectar at the bottom of the tube. The orchid and the moth had evolved together over millions of years, each shaping the other. The orchid growing a longer tube to ensure that only the right moth could reach its pollen. The moth growing a longer tongue to reach nectar no other creature could access. A relationship forged across geological time, so precise that each depends on the other for its survival. This is what millions of years of quiet conversation between species can produce. A perfect fit, so exact it looks designed, when in truth it was simply life listening to life and slowly, gently answering. Migration is one of the most ancient behaviors on Earth. Long before roads, long before compasses or maps or any human notion of direction, animals were crossing the world. The wildebeest of the Serengeti move in herds of over 1 million animals across the African savanna, following the rains in a circuit that has not changed in thousands of years. The monarch butterfly navigates from Canada to the mountains of Mexico using a time-compensated sun compass, a biological clock that adjusts for the movement of the sun across the sky. Salmon return from the open ocean to the exact river, the exact tributary, the exact stretch of stream where they were born, guided by the chemical signature of the water itself, a smell encoded in their memory as larvae and remembered years later across thousands of kilometers of open sea. These migrations do not happen because any individual animal decided to travel. They happen because the urge to move at a particular time in a particular direction is written into the body itself, a biological inheritance passed from parent to offspring since before recorded time. Migration is ancient memory encoded in flesh, the planet's own knowledge of itself written into the behavior of its creatures. Every element in your body was forged inside a star. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon that forms the backbone of every molecule in every one of your cells. None of it was created on Earth. All of it was forged inside stars. When the universe began, only hydrogen and helium existed. Everything heavier was built inside the nuclear furnaces at the hearts of stars, where pressure and heat fuse lighter elements into heavier ones. When those stars reached the end of their lives and exploded in the vast, silent flashes of supernovae, they scattered their contents across the galaxy. That scattered matter formed clouds which collapsed under gravity into new stars and planets. One of those planets was Earth, and on Earth, some of that stardust assembled itself over billions of years of chemistry and evolution into living things. You are assembled from the remnants of dead stars. The atoms in your body have been inside nebulae, inside other suns, inside the crushing heart of a supernova. They have been part of oceans, of mountains, of other living creatures across billions of years of time. To breathe tonight is to briefly borrow a piece of the universe, to give it a moment of warmth and thought, and eventually to return it to the great cycling of matter that has been going on since the beginning of everything. And now, dear listener, we come gently to the end of our journey. We have traveled together across the deep floor of oceans and the high canopies of ancient forests. We have rested with trees that have lived for thousands of years and marveled at birds that cross oceans by starlight. We have visited the living soil beneath our feet and the stars that made the atoms in our bones. Life on Earth is not a collection of separate facts. It is a single, unbroken story. Every creature, every plant, every invisible microbe in the stone is a thread in the same vast, breathing, dreaming tapestry. And you are part of it. You always have been. If your eyes are heavy now, you can let them close. Let the slow rhythm of your breath settle like sediment drifting down through still water. Let the thoughts of the day grow soft and distant. Let the stories of living things wrap gently around you, like roots around a stone, like mycelium threading through good dark earth. You are not separate from this world. You are woven into it, connected by every breath, every cell, every atom forged in the heart of a star long ago. If you've enjoyed this journey, I invite you to like, subscribe, or leave a comment when you next awaken. It helps this channel continue to grow, and it lets us keep sharing these quiet stories of wonder with the world. But for now, there is nothing more you need to do. Rest softly, dream gently, and remember that you are part of the most extraordinary story ever told. The story of life, still going, still breathing, still reaching toward the light. Good night,